everyone, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, a tech industry podcast presented by D&I Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. It's Thursday, 7 p.m. British time. We are live on twitch.tv/D&I Stream. I'm Josie Howarth. Hi. And as always, I am joined by my co host, Chris Seabuck, who is amazing and perfect in every way.
Absolutely every way. And I've got the wrong script open as well, so I can't remember what I'm supposed to say. Hello, everybody, and hello, Josey. So yes, this is our show. I can't remember what the title is either. This is how badly things are going today.
It's Get MV.
So yes, script open. Dear. Yes. So anyway, hello, Josey. And a big hello to everybody in Twitch chat. Please do get involved with the show as we are streaming live, and your comments are always welcome. In fact, your comments are better than the script because at least we can respond to them and have and not have any technical problems with them.
We could have technical problems with comments. I mean, if we're gonna throw out the fishing line for trouble, let's just throw out the entire net.
D&I Volstrat says D&I a tech comedy podcast. Oh dear.
I wish I was smart. I actually am jealous of people who have wit because I don't see myself as all that funny. And my gosh, there are people who can just on the turn of a dime say something and I'm gone. But as normal, since we're getting back into the groove of things, we've had some time off due to health and some other things that have happened, but we are back. And so before we begin with anything, as always, we have an icebreaker question, don't we? And this week's question is a very simple one, Chris. It's a statement. I've missed you.
Oh, thank you very much.
That is my icebreaker for today. You get to have a statement of your own as well.
I've missed having you here as well, Josey. It's as I've said multiple times on the dev streams and the few I think I've done maybe 2 podcasts without you over the last 8, 9, 12 weeks. I don't know how long it's been.
3 months, yeah.
It's very difficult. Not just have I missed you, it's also very difficult to do the podcast on my own. Because I have to, I can't give the guests as much attention as well as running the podcast and monitoring chat and setting everything up. And there's a lot of pre and post stuff as well. So, it's great to have you back for technical and practical reasons, but also great to have you back so we can have a discussion and chat and catch up and get the catharsis, that we thrive for every
that we
week.
miss when we don't have, this show. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, man. But yes, I've missed you.
So, tonight's vodcast, live stream, Twitch, whatever.
Vodcast? Sure.
I've also got something in my mouth that I keep biting, like the side of your cheek. I must have bit it in my sleep or something, so I keep doing that. Oh, it's going wrong, isn't it, today? Anyway, so tonight's podcast is entitled Git MV, which stands for move, for those who do not know, Git command line, master main. Now, this comes from the controversial, I think it was ZDNet, published an article about GitHub a few weeks back, maybe even a month back now. And they basically said that GitHub have made the decision to migrate the default branch for all new GitHub repositories to move it from master to main. And the main reason for that is because they want to basically remove any kind of reference to slavery, to any kind of uncomfortable language that may be used in tech. And in tech, we have got a few things that that are a few areas of language that shouldn't really be used and are a bit archaic and maybe should be updated. Now, the immediate reaction from a lot of people from the renaming of Git was, oh my god, this is going to affect so many things technically. A lot of techies thought that way, and then the other reaction was, oh my god, what? Why are we doing this? Because of what? Because it's a reference to slavery? What? And I'm genuinely, that was my immediate reaction as soon as I read the article. Before, no one told me what it was. One of my clients informed me and said, oh, by the way, GitHub are considering changing their master branch to main. And I was like, why? I mean, that's going to cause a lot of problems, Immediately, that's what I thought. So That's what we're here to discuss today, anyway. So, I mean,
Well, yeah. It's
that and a few
I
other things.
I think it's worth mentioning, I mean, this is a controversial topic,
Yes.
period. It deals with the fact that it seems seriously triggered by the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the protests and things that are happening. So, understand that when we're approaching this topic, neither Chris nor I will be able to sit here and tell you what the right answer is for anything.
No.
Both Chris and I have a firm set of codes of ethics that we have here at DNI Stream. And if you have any questions about that, visit dnistream.live and read our code of ethics. And what we're trying to do is understand it and trying to figure out not just the impact that it can have, but also why choices like this are happening and the further reaching consequences of any choices made or not made during this. So be aware that we're using this as a platform to hopefully get information and feedback from you who listen to us, but also to better grasp and understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yes, in
neither
our
of us are going to be
industry,
experts, and we're also.
no,
I
we're
know
not.
we come from two different demographics. We're but
Yes.
at the end of the day, we're both white as well. And let's get the
Yeah.
get the cards on the table here. I
Yeah. For those of you who don't actually watch us but listen
yeah.
to us, I am a white woman.
Now,
Okay.
don't think for a second that our code of ethics is pretty strong. We don't tolerate from our community any kind of racism, any kind of prejudice in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter. We don't even like people who come in here and say, "Well, Ruby's better than C# because Ruby's better." Unless you've got a good objective argument for Ruby being better than C#. We joke about it, but at the end of the day, everything and everybody's equal to us. But I
Yeah.
mean, that we'll get that out of the way, kind of a disclaimer. But at the end of the
It
day, this comes down to why is this happening, and also I
mhm.
want to dig into the technical ins and outs of it as well. What it's actually going to affect on the different scales, because everybody has a different opinion. Lots of people who use Git. Well, first of all, let's get one thing out of the way. GitHub, they are not the Git authority.
No, they are
They
not.
are a private company which are now owned by Microsoft, which is by the by, in
Yes.
this particular instance at least. They are a private company that has made a decision, or they use an open source tool as part of their main service. They offer a service that, yes, it has major influence on the industry, but they are not the authority or the be all and end all of Git. We can and do and have done, I have done plenty of times in the past, rolled my own Git repository. Whenever you type Git in it on your local machine, you have a Git repository. You could
Yeah.
put that on a Linux server and SSH into it and completely circumvent GitHub or Bitbucket or any of the other providers. But it's GitHub have specifically put something out there in the public eye, and we need to discuss that as well, and why they've done that, and I suppose a pine why they've done that, because we don't
Well,
know for certain.
there's a couple of different there's a couple of different ways I immediately have when I saw this particular news article. My literal reaction was, why? At no point in time has there ever been a reference to master and slave inside of repositories. In my entire career working with them, it's never been a thing. The only thing when I think of master and slave is hard drives. Like, that is the only time I have seen master and slave used in a technological manner. Well, there are a couple others, but, like, that's, like, my immediate thought was the hardware. And then my second thought, and this is a shocking one to me, was, my gosh, is this just a political stunt? Because if so, that so devalues what the movement's trying to do in the first place. You
Yeah,
know?
I
It
think
it's
my
it
immediate reaction was technical, and it was like, why? Oh, God, this is going to cause so many problems. And then I realized it's just going to be for new
Mhm.
repos, and wasn't as much of a problem in my head, because then it's a repo level decision or a business decision. I'm thinking about this from the enterprise side of things. I would quite
Right.
happily rename the DNI repository masters to main. No problem whatsoever. It would affect. I'd probably have a few hours work updating the CI/CD systems, and then I just have to adjust whenever I went and use that repository to use main instead of master. It's not the end of the world to me.
Mhm.
But I think what the key thing is the reasoning behind it, as you kind of touched on. Then,
Mm,
if it's a political stunt, um, then I can see that from both sides. I can see that as a positive thing and also a manipulative thing. If it's a completely commercial and it's completely about marketing and which we'll never know. We don't know the inner
that's
workings of a company. We don't know if their ethics and morals are steadfast and hard, and they definitely they want equality across the board, and we don't know that, and we can never judge that.
yeah.
So I have to, as an optimist, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt here and say that if it is for political reasons, which it's got to be. I mean, if they've specifically mentioned that this is because of the BLM movement and various other movements, of removing tech. I mean, it actually comes from a document back in 2003, I think. The IETF put forward a document that said, let's try and remove negative language from tech. Master slave was one of the terms. Blacklist, whitelist was one of the terms. And I agree with that kind of thing. Blacklist, white. It doesn't matter what the
Black
etymology
hat,
of it
white
is.
hat.
Yeah,
It's
those kind
it,
of things. 'Cause black is considered negative in that instance, and white is not. And
which
that,
is why I prefer cracker and hacker. Just throwing that out there. That's
but that, I
an
mean, that's the
argument for
thing
other
is,
time.
there's so many. We've English is such a verbose language. We've got so many other words that we can use for things that I don't see a
Well,
problem on a language level.
I think that's part of it comes from connotation and denotation for the words. So for those of you who don't speak English as a first language, connotation are the implied meanings that are given to a word, whereas denotation tends to be, and I'm probably saying denotation wrong, but it tends to be the dictionary definition of a word. So a single word like cup could have multiple variations and definitions connotatively and denotatively, and then there's the implications behind all of
It's
that.
Oxford Dictionary versus Urban Dictionary.
In some cases, it
A little bit.
really can be. In some cases, it absolutely can be. Now, I the thing for me that I feel that there is a need for acknowledgement of poorly used and poorly selected words, either due to unconscious bias or even conscious bias or anything else like that. I mean, this is something we all as humans have to work on. We all have an unconscious bias towards something, even if it's like to eating eggs or something like they're unconscious.
Hmm.
Hello, welcome to human psychology. But I think that at the same time, the discussions that we have should be had in such a way that give purpose and point. So the idea of changing the master branch, the branch, main branch, whatever you want to call it, from master to main, okay. That to me seems to feel less of a connection to the movements or things going on as compared to, hey, we're using master and slave here, or black hat and white hat here, or something along those lines, blacklist, whitelist, simply because there is nothing else other than the word master involved with branches.
Do you know what it's done though? In,
Yeah.
in in counter to that though, what it's done is it's made us and many other people talk about it.
Oh,
And fair enough, it's only a small catchment,
that
and
is
that
something that I approve of.
that is absolutely necessary, and we need to have these
Mm.
discussions in order to improve as the human race. We are human people, we're not black people and white people to me. Now, yes, we have different coloured skins. Yes, we have different cultures, and all of that should be embraced. And and I mean, fair enough. I'm not going to embrace black culture because I'm white, and I mean, I say that I listen to rap music. I listen to I don't reappropriate things, if you know what I mean, but I enjoy certain elements of different cultures. But that doesn't mean I'm ever going to be in that culture or in that catchment, if you know what I mean. So, but I
Mm.
think this brings the difficult conversations to the table. And there's a few times already in this podcast I flushed up a little bit because I don't really know how to express myself. But I think it's
I think
important and valuable to talk about this.
That's I think the number one thing, if nothing else gets taken away from this and people completely disagree with our statements or have their own opinions or what have you, it's the fact that we're trying to talk about it, I think. I mean, we have so many things that are, for lack of a better term, horrible happening in our world. People are impacted negatively all the time. I mean, Chris and I have had discussions about what it's like for being a woman in technology versus what he goes through. And, in Chris's case, there are a couple of times where his eyes have just gone, wow, like he doesn't treat people like that. So it doesn't occur to him that thus it could be occurring. Because I remember you mentioned something like you were working with a client at one time and
Mm.
a woman actually approached you and was expressing to you the frustration she felt in the industry. And you were just like, this stuff happens?
Last year, I had two separate clients, and there was two individual women in two different clients. One was suffering quite blatant sexism and not being taken seriously because she was a woman, and it was quite obvious that that was the case. And another one that won't really go into that, but it was basically they broke down at me, and they were it's hard to know what to say in that situation because it doesn't affect me, but I can just try and listen, at the end of the day.
Well, that's the thing. Empathy is, I think, key. You know, I no two people I know are impacted the same way by the same event. I mean, it's that whole there's three parts to every story. The two people who are involved in what actually happened. It goes back to what makes us human. But I think that simply being able to have this discussion, and it is an awkward discussion because, well, how do you handle it if you've never experienced it? I myself am, like I said, for those of you who can't see, and for those of you who can, I am a white woman living in the United Kingdom, and I've been told to go back to my country. That is a really weird feeling, but I've only experienced it once. So,
Yeah.
being on that kind of receiving end for that kind of, abuse, I haven't experienced. Being a woman, on the other hand, being told that literally every decision I make simply because I happen to have estrogen in my system and I happen to be female and I am the cause and root of all evil in existence, I have received that a lot. So I can at least take a moment from the empathic side and go, if you're constantly bombarded by stuff and it is shaping and forming our conscious and on our unconscious biases, you know, I can understand or at least empathize to the difficulty. But yeah, this
So
conversation is
there was
important.
something else. There was something else you mentioned really early on in the conversation, and it was um, there are no references in Git or that you're aware of where master, or rather branches that come off master, are referenced as slaves.
Yeah.
You said something to that effect.
Something like in my case, I have never dealt in a repository situation where I have seen master in reference to slave. Master to me, pardon me, in a Git thing tends to be what I see as the authoritative copy of something like the de facto, which when I think of the term master, because perhaps of the upbringing I have, I think of teacher, educator, someone who has mastered the craft of whatever trade they've applied their skills into, even degrees, master's degrees, things like that. That's what I think of when I hear the term master.
If I told
So,
you that if I'd read the original specification for Git, and there is a specific there are numerous references in there that state that any branch that isn't master is a slave branch, would you change your opinion on this? Because at the moment I mean, you haven't said
oh,
explicitly,
I
but I'm
haven't
assuming
explicit. I should explicitly
you're
state my opinion. My explicit opinion on this is people should be able to name the core branch whatever they want to name it.
no, but this
Honestly,
is specifically the
but
default branch naming. So this is
right,
the
I
branch naming that you
understand.
get
When it
given by the provider or by the software that is giving you the service.
when it comes to technology, I have learned you have to take what you're given.
Yeah, I
That I
mean,
have
the thing
learned.
is,
But
everybody can rename the Git branch like that.
I understand, like, how to phrase this? I'm perfectly fine with them making this change. However, I want it to be done for the right reasons, not for reasons such as pure marketing and trying to make certain that they look good in a particular situation. Because that, to me, like I said at the very beginning, seems to demean what the entire purpose of the movement is.
So
So
going,
if they're more altruistic than should be, I'm perfectly okay with that. It
so
it it
we've
doesn't
al- we've
impact me on a technical level.
we've
So,
already established that we're never going to find that out. Pretty much, unless somebody comes
mm,
out within GitHub and says that the CEO is inherently sexist and everybody who works here is, is racist and they never hire black people. If they start saying things like that and that starts, yes, okay, we know that they've done it for marketing reasons, but otherwise, we've got absolutely no right to ever claim that a business, because we have a code of ethics. Every company has a code of ethics. I'm pretty sure. I haven't read Microsoft's, but I'm pretty sure Microsoft are an equal opportunity employer. I'm not saying that they don't have some prejudices within the system.
it
I
goes
don't
back to
know,
the whole
but
conscious bias and unconscious bias thing.
so that's the thing. Yeah. So this is about unconscious and conscious. So
Mhm,
if we go back to my question, then if I
mhm.
said that the Git spec specifically, the original Git spec specifically has references to master and slave in there, would that
Mhm.
change your opinion?
I think at this current moment in time, I would have a much stronger leaning towards one way or another. Like, right now, there's sort of an apathy to it because I'm not impacted by it directly. Like, when I see the term master, my brain doesn't immediately get turned toward a negative connotation
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said, I see it as educational. To me, those are positive
So
terms.
we're talking.
However,
So we're talking about
however,
objective facts here. If
right.
if
But
if
if
that is
that
the case,
happens, if that is the case, then I think this is the perfect time to have the discussion and make that change.
okay,
Because it goes back to my statement about the master and slave and the hardware pairing when you're trying to set up the drives using jumpers, you
that
know?
isn't a fact. I made that up. Right. The reason I
Yeah.
made that up is to see if that would change your opinion. Now, what if I said that when Linus Torvalds designed Git, he designed Git out of frustration from using another source control system called BitKeeper,
Yep,
and
big keeper.
he very much used to use BitKeeper almost exclusively by the sounds of it. And I can't remember, I
Mm,
don't know the exact frustrations he had, but he wanted to write his own, like a lot of programmers do. They want to write their own thing. We all do it. Anyway, he went off and wrote Git, and it's now the biggest source control system in the world. It controls probably 60%, I think, the last time I looked up specs of the world's repositories, or public repositories at least, anyway, if not more
yeah.
than that. Now, what would you say if the mechanism for GitKeeper, but I haven't used BitKeeper, so I don't know exactly how it works, but the mechanism for BitKeeper is similar to Git. You've got branches in it, you've got a master branch, and you've got slave branches, as they refer to. And the spec in BitKeeper refers to slave branches.
Again, it's the same thing. I would want there to with this type of, I should say cultural awareness being a lot more open for discussion, I would think it's a perfect time to have a discussion about things like that, and if required, make changes.
So that is a fact. That what I've just said there. So the BitKeeper spec back in 2001, bearing in mind that Git came out in I think it was the first release was 2005 or something like that. There's a BitKeeper spec or a how-to, and I can link it in chat, that specifically has 23 references to slave branches within it.
Mm,
So the intent behind the original design, we can assume from this, and again, this is all assumptions, that the intent from the original design of Git came from the original design of BitKeeper in some way, shape, and form, which
mm.
had master and slave branches, or at least it had slave references in its documentation. But Git, as far as I'm aware, does not anywhere. And I am exactly the same as yourself, Josey. I have never once thought of a branch from master ever being a slave of master. Not because of I have a problem with the
I
word
see it like a
slave.
tree.
But yeah, it's because we are
It's
branching from the main branch, and we do some work, and then we merge back into the main branch, the
the
master branch,
trunk,
the trunk.
literally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the core piece of code. The slaves don't exist for, if that's what we're terming them as, the slaves don't exist for very long.
Yeah.
It's not that it does. I'm now starting to think of branches as slaves because of this discussion,
That
but
is
I'm not doing it consciously, and I would certainly never refer to them. I'd just refer to them as branches. I'd still
but
never use the term slave.
but see, this goes back to what I was saying before about there being connotations, denotations, and then, of course, the things that you experience. I'm very hyper aware when certain terms are used because I've been impacted by them. So, to me, this is a really good chance to have a dialogue, no matter how uncomfortable someone may feel about it, because it's like, well, how have we been doing things? And it's not just sort of the Black Lives Matter movement, but it's just everything. Anyone who is marginalized, how and why? Like, there's a big topic to be had there. And the only thing I can say is, as humans, we just need to do better. But
We do.
going back to things, I also want to address some things that have also been said in our chat, because I don't want them to think we're ignoring them, because they make excellent, excellent statements. And I also feel like coughing. Dear God, I have. Pardon me, my throat has gone incredibly dry. Chris, could you do me a favor, please, and read some of what Voltcrack has said? Because my throat is, yeah, it's very bad.
Okie dokie. So, Volstrat said earlier on, I'd love to see more. This is when you were talking about women in tech. I'd love to see more women in tech jobs, but with all the sexism I have witnessed in technical fields, I'd shy away from it as well. I
Mm, sorry about that.
used to see a lot of sexism. Now I see people, uh, old school, some old school people tiptoeing around it when they resent it a little bit. They resent the fact that they have to mind the language. They have to mind the terms that they
Mhm.
use. They have to mind the fact. I mean, I've never seen it personally. I've never seen a woman being slapped on the bum or anything in work. That I've never seen. I mean, that's as far as I could see it. I think that's as bad as I would see
Be
it in
thankful.
casual. Sorry.
I said, be thankful.
But what I'm saying is, I haven't witnessed that, and I've certainly
Hmm.
never done it myself. I've got a lot more respect for people, not just women, than that. But
It,
it, to me, somebody is, um, any person, any individual is judged on their merits and their worth and what they are good at work. For me, that's where it stops. The sex, the color, the creed, the race, the clothes that they're wearing. I mean, unless they've got
yeah.
hygiene problems, sometimes that does make me think. I maybe got a little bit of prejudice against that, and sometimes I'll say something if I get friendly with them. But and if I'm a manager, I certainly will say something to them, because that's my job, to make sure that the team is happy in general. But that's the difficult thing to broach. But that's probably as prejudiced as I get at work, in a working environment at least. People have to.
Well, that's see that means we can actually sort of twist this and throw this back at you. You're responsible for a team, and you know you're actually seeing people consciously or unconsciously doing some form of repression, be it due to sex or skin color or culture, dialect. My gosh, you're from York? What? Holy cow, you're Mancunian? Holy cow, like whatever. You know, there are ways to handle that, and it's that's actually veering us into a separate topic. So let me sort
Yeah.
of
Well, it's
pull
all
us
related, though. I mean, I'm
it
not trying to
well,
devalue the
no,
the
no, no.
the
The
master
thing is,
slave reference, but it's still all related. It's all
well,
similar
that's
kind of things, prejudices.
it's all about terminology and how things are used and the intent behind them. I don't think you and I are the type of people to look at the word master and think in a derogatory manner that implies what is or basically anything involving slavery. I mean, heck, I mean, if you want to get technical, when I think master, my brain doesn't think anything like that. It thinks in the world of the BDSM craziness out there, because you know the
Hang on. The
some
terminology
of
in
my
that world.
clients
The ter-
some of my clients work in that area, and I'll tell you something, the terminology and the way that is, there is one massive key difference to that culture than you see pretty much anywhere else. And it's known as safe, sane, and consensual. So if you're going to have someone be called master and someone be called slave, it is consensually agreed upon for that activity.
I get it, right? We're going into a very different subject there. I've got quite a
Exactly.
few things that have
But
popped into my brain about that I'd probably
yeah, I
like
was
to
going to
say.
say, but going back to the master slave comment, sorry for derailing. It's just there are so many different terms related to it.
Yeah,
Um, when I was trying to figure out why this might be an important topic of discussion, one of the things that stood out to me is something that happened to me. When I had a recruiter approach me, and instead of asking me if I was a one-woman shop, asked me if I was a one-girl shop. There was an implication that hit me where I got absolutely infuriated by that recruiter because I'm like, "Why can't I be a woman? Why do I have to be a one-girl show?" You don't say a one-boy show, you say a one-man show. Why can't I have a like, that triggered me. So, I can see how some people can have the, uh, emotional reactions towards a certain way or a certain terminology, even if they're not intended or implied.
I think that also goes to there's another movement around the term guys, using the collective term guys to talk to a group of people at work. Um, while even a lot of females will say, "All right, guys, how are you doing?" You know, even if the girls the team has got a few girls on it, generally, unless it is a group of girls or women, they will say guys at work, which is an interesting psychological thing. But there are a lot of people who are moving to gender neutral terms. Someone, I think it must have been an American article I was reading, someone said the term y'all. They use y'all to just, to address people. I just say,
You
hello,
all.
people. Hello, everybody. It's
Well,
easy enough,
it
isn't it?
depends on the group I'm approaching. I mean, if it's people who I know, it's hello beautifuls because it makes a difference.
Yeah.
But some people could see that as sexual harassment, whereas
Hmm.
I'm generally talking about the personality. But again, it's my brain doesn't do the thing.
Yeah. How is
It
everybody
doesn't see
today?
that.
How is everybody today? It's not hard to say something like that. I mean, I know it's a bit more formal than sometimes you'd like, and we all have our own caveats to our personalities and the way that we talk and the way we address people. I mean, some of the terms I use to describe some of our best friends are the worst. I wouldn't ever say them live on air, but we're all the same. And let's be honest, most people are like that in their own living rooms. I mean, what's his name? Eminem said it, didn't he? He said in one of his songs, that I do basically what you do with your friends in your living room. We're all the same. But the problem is we have to try and cater for people, and some people will call it sugarcoating and mollycoddling and what was the snowflake, pandering or whatever. I mean, that's offensive in itself because that assumes that you're more important and your opinion is more important than the people that you're offending. It's a very
I
delicate line they have to
I think the
balance on.
difficulty is there is no one easy answer,
No,
solid bullet. And what instead I
acknowledge
think
it
in
and
a
say
way
sorry.
there's
Swallow
the
your
well,
pride.
that's a big part of it. I think being able to actually directly ask someone, am I like if you get offended by something that I have said, and it's entirely possible. I mean, it's I'm verbally spitballing here without a script, But if you do, let me know and let's have a discussion about it. Don't immediately assume that my intent is to come at you and rip your throat out, because that I think is part of the problem. We end up wanting to have these discussions, but some of the people who we end up trying to have these discussions with can be very defensive immediately instead
Hmm.
of listening. And I think that it makes a difference actually what topic that's about. Whether we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, we're talking about sexism, or we're talking about Linux versus Windows, or we're talking about PC versus Xbox, or we're talking about DFS sale versus IKEA. Like it makes no difference what the topic is. If you approach something that has an emotional charge to it, it can be very difficult to have these discussions. or
You
to
sent
learn more.
you sent me some links last week, the YouTube videos you sent me, which we
Oh
should be able to share
yeah,
them resend them to me. We'll put them in the document and put
the,
them on the show notes.
yeah,
But I did
yeah,
watch them all,
definitely.
and they were about 20 minutes long each of them, and it's way too long for a YouTube video for me. But I did watch them all because they were
I'm
very
so proud
interesting.
of you and your
Um,
attention span.
but it was one of the interesting things that I took away from that is that there's this psychological condition that people have when they are behind a screen, when they're behind a phone, when they're not talking to people directly face to face. Those same people that might be offensive to other groups of people, or even the same group of people, the same group that they belong in, that might be offensive behind a screen, might not at all ever be offensive in real life because they're protected by this screen. They feel, even if they're not anonymous, even if they have their real name out there, they still feel protected by the screen. I have been using video chat and I've been podcasting and streaming and doing things online since the first time that I could get that video connection up between me and a friend over in the northeast. That very first time that worked, and it was a conversation that wasn't all
Net
since
meeting,
then
my friend.
since
Net
then
meeting.
it's been wonderful. I've done it, I've done the same with my wife when I've been away for work and things like that, and it's just great. So I'm used to it, and I am who I am. Yes, I act a bit differently when we do podcasts, when we do these
Well,
podcasts, because
it's known as the watcher thing as well. If
yeah,
you're being watched or something like that, you will act completely different than if you think no one's watching you.
or even
And the
just
reason
slightly
why is
differently.
because that's because there's a conscious awareness of the fact that there is a witness. If you don't have a conscious awareness and you honestly think you're alone, you do things you wouldn't normally
Oh,
do.
absolutely. There's certainly some habits that I have that I wouldn't stream, and
Oh gosh,
we know that
yeah.
people do, and we have them because people
We all
accidentally stream
do.
things, by accident.
Oh,
There was
oh
someone
yeah.
who offered to quit the job because they went and had a shower. They were on an hour meeting, an hour Zoom meeting, and they went to have a shower while they were in. It was like I think it was someone in the government, and it was someone quite high up, and they were. They had a shower and they had the phone by the shower while.
I've seen people because of
Oh
the
no! It was
pandemic
a
that's
live
going
stream
on
council meeting. It was a live stream council meeting.
I, the thing is, we've also seen due to this pandemic things like, people going to the bathroom
Hmm.
while in meetings because they thought they turned the camera off and they didn't.
Yeah.
Like, we're starting to see that we're all human and we're all flawed, and that's okay, hopefully.
Well, I think it'll go back. It'll go back to normal, though. That's the thing. But anyway, we're moving off the topic.
Ever so slightly,
All
yes.
of this is related, though, and it's all about language. And I think to me, it all
Mm.
comes down to intent, and it comes down to what is the intention behind the usage of that language. Now, the intention may not be negative at all, even for BitKeeper back when it was master and slave, slave
Or the
branches,
hard drives.
or the hard drives. It might not be,
Yeah.
it might not have negative intent, but unfortunately, it has negative connotations for hundreds of years of thousands of not thousands, hundreds of years of history of people.
Masters and slaves have been around for a very long time. I mean, going back to
I
Grecians and
suppose, yeah,
Romans. I mean,
were
the
we about
entire
10,000?
concept. I mean, the entire concept of slavery has been around probably as long as humans have, and have
So
put value in some way, shape, and form on something.
So either way, it's still a negative thing.
It,
Why should one person ever own another person? Why should a married man own his wife? Like it is in some cultures even today, or why it has been even in our culture.
mm,
In Western culture, for if that's a culture. Is Western culture? I don't know. I don't know anything about cultures.
actually,
Or
it is actually seen as a culture, believe it or not.
you
I
get the
will
idea,
state,
though.
I think what it comes down to is what we were talking about before. There is an unconscious cultural bias that the world has, which is why we have things like blacklist and whitelist, why certain objects are classified as she or he.
Hmm.
Your car is probably a she. I don't know anyone who actually classifies their car as a male, but there are certain attributes that are applied to objects or to literally in this case objects. We're talking about hardware and things like that as well.
But they also
And
have in
we
language as well. French, they have they have feminine and
Feminine and
masculine, don't they?
men,
I don't know
masculine.
how
Yep, they
that
do that in
applies to
Espanol as
this.
well. But the thing is, they do this is something that is sort of inherent within the culture. We classify. It's the best way for us to understand things is by putting them into the box,
Hmm.
regardless of how poorly designed the boxes may be. In fact, if you ever get a chance to listen to Rhythm C's Boxes, there's a song he wrote about boxes, absolutely ingenious. But what it comes down to is we default naturally to, oh, blacklist, whitelist, black hat, white hat, master slave. Why? And I think that's part of what the intent for the discussion is to stop that immediate just, oh well, this is what it's always been called, so let's call it that. Instead, perhaps look at the implications as to why we as humans make the choices that we make instead of just blindly following whatever pack has been set ahead of us. And I think that's what's really been triggered in my mind about this whole concept of changing master to main and git. It's the, well, why was it called that originally? I don't think anyone I know understands where the original term for master comes from in git
Or
because we just by default use it based on that's what we were taught, blah 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 blah. It's one of those things that has encouraged a discussion that wasn't there before. So it goes back to the old phrase: you are doomed to repeat history if you do not learn from it and if you do not study it. So, in a way, this forces a conscious effort to learn and not just blindly accept.
Mhm.
And I'm all for that.
Now, a lot of techies will have immediately, or will use the argument that, well, it's a lot of effort to change this, especially in big enterprise systems. It's a big effort to change master to main, because if you're in a distributed version control system, everybody's got that copy on their machine, everybody merges into it, everybody pull requests into it. There's CI/CD systems and tagging systems that might or might not be attached to it, and they could be extremely complicated. Master could be would be probably likely to be hard-coded everywhere and hard-coded into people's brains as well. So it would be quite a significant cost for people to move from master to main or master to anything. Now, there are other companies. In fact, there are actually quite a lot of open source projects already that have adopted completely different naming conventions for their main branch. Some of them have named it from master to main. Some of them keep the master branch there, but they just work in a dev branch. It is completely up to them and open to them how they do it. But most of those decisions won't have been made because it was master slave. They'll have been made because they misunderstand what the master branch is. And I am currently going through that with one of my clients, is trying to explain to them what master means to the process and how updating master should be a ceremony. It should be a process that gets vetted and signed off type thing, especially in bigger systems where you've got lots of people pushing code to it. It should be stable at all times and that kind of
It
thing.
is
And
a
that's it.
milestone.
It is the master copy, the master copy of code. It's like a gold master that you do for audio recording.
Albums.
For albums. The gold master is the master that all of the copies are made from. And that's what a branch is to me. It's a master copy of the source code, and all of the branches are, in Git, technically, they aren't actually copies, and that's the beautiful thing about Git, is that this could be one of my not RTFMs, BYOMs at the end.
Bring your own manual.
I've learned I knew a lot about Git already, but I've learned a lot about the inner workings and the internals of Git recently. And physically what happens is Git is made up of, if you've ever studied a Git repository, you've got a .git folder. That .git folder is your repository. All the files that sit outside of that folder, as in your working copy, they don't really exist. Git makes them. Git fabricates them from the history. It builds up the working copy, and that's why it's so quick at switching branches. That's why branch changes are very quick, and it's not even they're not even copies or slaves or anything. Technically, they're nothing. They don't
Well,
exist. They are references that get created. So technically, we might have a lot of work and there might be a cost, but companies are not going to make that decision easily and lightly. So in corporations, such as, I don't know, let's use an example when we talked about this last week. Microsoft own GitHub. Microsoft
yes, they
also
do.
own Azure repos. Azure repos, i.e. Team Fortress Online. Team Fortress? That's the computer game. Team Foundation Online, or whatever you want to call it these days, Visual Studio Online. It's got about 500, had about 500 different names. It's now Azure DevOps with the DevOps repos. Anyway, Azure repos are owned by Microsoft. So we've got two products that do almost exactly the same thing. One's open source focused and one's enterprise focused. Microsoft have not made an announcement referring to the enterprise version, just the open source version. So that says something.
I think that's why when we started this conversation, I have that sort of the thing sitting in the back of my brain where it's more cynical, because I'm a pretty optimistic and hopeful person, and I tend to look at the best of intentions first before immediately jumping to you're out to get me. But I'm a bit cynical in the whole GitHub side of things, and I think it was triggered because we had that conversation last week. Because if you have a parent company, yes, that doesn't mean they dictate everything that the tiny little companies underneath them do. If you want to consider Azure DevOps and GitHub tiny little companies, but in the grand scheme of things, they're under the umbrella of Microsoft.
The
Um,
multi-billion-pound companies each, probably.
yes, tiny little things. They could do so much better. They're just little baboos, as they're nicknamed with my group of friends. But they have different marketing, different target audiences and everything, but because of the fact that it isn't this grand sweeping opus done um, by the over umbrella company of Microsoft, it made me cynical about the intents and the purposes. One thing I will say is, regardless of what their reasoning is, we're having a discussion, and I can approve of that.
I think they
I
would have done it anyway.
do I the thing is, I don't know because I haven't followed the conversation about it since, what was it, 2003 that this was being had? Because this is the thing. I'm living my daily life. I'm running my company. I'm, hanging out with my friends. I am doing the stuff in my life. I can't follow everything.
Neither can
It
I, and the only
is
reason I know a bit about it
impossible.
is because I've dug into it a little bit, because it's an
But see,
interesting
I wouldn't
topic.
even known to dig into it until this whole thing got mentioned in the first place.
But does that not make us both a little bit ignorant towards it?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, but the thing is, we are constantly living in a day and age where there are things happening that we're not going to know enough about because we don't have the ability to see and be omnipotent.
Yeah.
We are very much so individuals living in our own lives. This does not mean that we don't want to learn. It just means, how would I know things? As an example, let's see, back when I was in my early 20s, I was involved in transgender rights. And all of a sudden, not too many years ago, I started hearing this term cisgendered thing passed around. I had no idea what that meant at the time at all. I was completely confused. Like, I wasn't in that world anymore. I wasn't part of the activistic movement because I was just trying to pay my bills. That I missed all the new terms that came out. Like, I missed everything, and my brain just went, "Wait,
I've missed the
what?"
last 3 Metallica albums because I stopped listening to like new, because I'm not in a band anymore. It's the same kind of thing. I'm
But
not trying to
that's the
devalue it. I'm just
thing.
saying it's, you get
No,
on with life,
no,
don't you?
it's
And you don't, if you're not
you do.
actively involved in something, you won't keep up to date with the
Exactly. So
newer
in this case, this
terminology.
is sort of like a in the world of technology and development, it's kind of like in a way a conversation topic starter. Pardon me. But at the same time, you know, you cannot expect people to know every term or understand every issue or anything if they're not living it and experiencing it. And you can't hold it against people if they don't know. You
No,
should be willing to ask and learn. But yes, does that make us ignorant? Yes. Does it make us ignorant by choice? No, we're just literally trying to
I
live,
don't
which is
think.
why we have these conversations, why we want to talk to people.
I'm not sure ignorant by choice is a thing. Surely people don't just. I mean, if someone doesn't hear something, that doesn't mean they're they you say something directly to them and they don't
I
hear it.
have never heard in my entire life a single Justin Bieber song. I have consciously chosen to be ignorant to anything that that guy has created. So,
Okay.
yes, there is the ability to be consciously ignorant.
Yeah, I suppose. I suppose. I don't
And
know. I
I'm
just
not
struggle
kidding
if
either. I have never heard a
there's
Bieber
also
song.
what when
Well, no, I heard
Outcast were a
one.
thing that I had the same thing with them. I didn't want to listen to a now all I can bloody hear is old Outcast songs. But anyway, no, the point is there is no answer here. It's not for us to decide what GitHub do with
No,
their. Unfortunately, they, as I said, that they're not the authority on Git, but they are a major authority on Git, and
they're a
they
big voice.
have a big voice, and that's I think for me as an optimist wants to take from this. I want to take from even if this is a marketing ploy or a stunt, it's going to get
Mm.
people to talk about them
Yep.
directly, but it's also going to get people to talk about the issue. And the issue is much wider than just the tech industry, way wider than the tech industry. Yes, the tech industry has its problems, but the world has its problems in how it deals with issues of race, issues of sexism, and issues of prejudice in general.
Just in general,
Just
yeah.
in everything. I must have prejudices. I definitely have prejudices against one catchment of people in the world, but I'm not going to say it out loud online. I'll tell you
The
afterwards.
fact that you even acknowledge
Oh
that,
no, I
Chris.
do. I do. I have active prejudices against them, but it's more of a joke than anything else.
Oh, right,
But
right.
at the same time, it's also I haven't experienced people in that catchment in any other way, and I'll tell you the story
Actually,
afterwards.
hearing you say that, I'm going to take this as my BYOM. So this is part of my bring your own manual because we're getting close to the end of our show here. I recently learned that one of my favorite authors during his lifetime was a racist and anti-Semitic.
Hmm.
Did- And for those of you who are curious, what I'm talking about is H.P. Lovecraft.
Right.
However, while he did spout um, quite a bit of strong verbosity towards people of color or people who were Jewish, he also was exceptionally good friends with quite a few Jewish people who were very, very Jewish, and quite a few people of color who were very, very, very much so
It's
people
called
of
the
color.
duality of man, though. That isn't it? It's
The thing is, it's like
of man of people.
that's the thing. It's the joke we make as developers. People suck, individuals are awesome. But we joke about that, about just like in this very big mushroom cloud kind of way. People suck, but individuals are amazing.
So we've
And
had
in a weird way, it's kind of got that flow to it.
before we
The
close up
big
because we are running a little bit late. We've got one comment
yeah.
from Volstrat, which is, "How would you respond to the argument we couldn't possibly just avoid all words that might be associated with a negative meaning in every context we can imagine?" Now, this is the extreme argument that a lot of people have with this, and I know Volstrat's usually very quite level-headed in his arguments, and
Mhm.
he's we have some good chats in Discord. So I'm sure he's posing this as a what if, more than anything.
Well, the way I look
Um,
at it is this. I can simply by talking completely infuriate someone because I'm a woman in the tech field. I have zero control over how someone responds to me. All I can control is myself and what I do. When it comes to words and choices, I ask. It goes back to what I said before. If I am talking to somebody and I use a term or a phrase, for example, one of the more common ones, he, she, they, and I turn to someone and go, hey, I want you to meet Anks. They're awesome. That's one thing. However, someone has corrected me and said, please don't say there. And when reference to me, please use he. And I'm like, cool, not a problem. But because of the fact that we literally cannot control anybody else but ourselves, what it comes down to is us being willing to hear the purpose behind why someone may have said something and be willing to correct them if we are offended by it. Because it's simply known as decency and respect. I simply want to be seen as a developer in the IT world, as someone who is part of the WordPress community, as someone who is part of the security community. I just want to be seen as that. However, I know some people who want to be seen as I am the woman security master inside of this company because there is a weight and a feeling to it for them. There isn't for me, but there is for someone else. That's cool. I can respect that. That doesn't change how I see you. Are you competent or are you not competent? That tends to be how I do some
Yeah.
weighing on things. But it literally comes down to being able to communicate and have that discussion and not be offended if someone didn't know. The world is way too vast for us to have a conscious collective memory. We're not data banks.
I absolutely agree, and I've had a few instances, only online though, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier, but I got a bit distracted by myself. uh, Only online I get people who are so hung up on one word that I've said, or they'll go through my blog and they'll find an entry from 15 years ago and go, well, you said this back then. And I'm like, that was 15 years? What? What is that? What? You're just nullifying your argument. Why even? You just want to be right. But the thing is, everybody's got their own journey that they're going on. Everybody's got their own life. And you can never please everybody. For all I care, you could refer to me as anything. Honestly, you could call me anything, and I wouldn't care less. I'm happy with my life, and I'm happy with how I get on with it.
I'm just going to call you perfect, Chris.
I'm not. It's a joke, but so we talk about it. But I couldn't care less, as long as I'm always learning and I'm kind of happy in my life. I'm happy, you know. I'm me, you know. As long as me and my wife are good and generally family's healthy and everything like that, I'm a happy person. But I think, yeah, and guinea pigs, of course. I think trying to remove all of the negative language in the world is a mistake. Trying to remove all of the statues of H.P. Lovecraft or of the scout leader guy that they're trying to take down because he was a known something racist, I think, possibly.
See, this
Edward Bowen or something like that. I can't remember his name.
This is the thing.
Why erase history? Why you can't erase it? It's always have happened, but don't celebrate them. But
that's
change the plaque to say non-racist, also created the Scouts. You know, that'd be fine. I'd be happy with that. Non-racist, we do not celebrate this. That's
something I would love to see with this whole change in Git. When it gets shifted over to main, and that is it for the rest of the thing, there needs to be very clearly, you know, we call this main because in the past we used this and there were implications, because we have as a society the memory of a goldfish. And that is actually a silly thing because goldfish can be taught. I'm actually assuming horrible things about goldfish right now, having really short memory spans. Point being, though, we have a very short attention span. And things move so quickly in a digital age where we're bombarded left, right, and center by so many different things going on, including just living your own life. What we have to realize is simply we need to make those we need to acknowledge the elephants in the room and stop them being elephants in the room. Let them just be an acknowledged fact. You know, this guy sucked because he did this, but he also did this. And that also is an important part. No one I know is truly 100% quote unquote evil. I don't even believe in the concept of good and evil, but that's a whole discussion for another time. Everybody has their good and their bad. And what you see as good and what you see as bad is literally going to be on your perspective. You are upside down, Chris.
I just changed. I'm just adding a bit of lightheartedness to the serious conversation. I'm sorry, I didn't do that on purpose.
Chris literally just flipped himself upside down on stream for those of you who are listening to us. If you are even still listening to us after. By this point, Chris, we may no longer have friends.
That isn't what I wanted to do either. I was trying to very cleverly try and flip myself in a... Oh, it's all gone wrong now. I was trying to flip because I'm backwards on the stream, and I won't remember to do it if I don't do it right now. Oh dear. Anyway, right. So let's close the show. We've put the worlds to rights. It's probably the most serious podcast we've ever done.
We've tried to. I mean, the reality is we can always do better. That is never going to change.
Always be open to learning.
We can always do better.
Always be open to learning.
Swallow that pride. There's no reason for it.
Absolutely. I mean, we all have pride. There's nothing wrong with a bit of pride. But when it comes to learning new things and opening to new experiences, I'm all for that. If I have any problems in my marriage or anything like that, I always want to try and learn what I'm doing wrong or what we can do better. Everything in my life, I'm always trying to improve. Not trying to fix, trying to improve, change myself.
I think that's the key, because the moment you start seeing yourself as completely broken, it becomes harder to fix psychological things. Instead, just we're improving. And side note, for those of you who are still listening at the end of all of these things with the craziness of our show, this is a little more serious than we normally do topic wise, and it is on a topic that has many, many sides and can be seen as controversial. So thank you, if nothing else, for at least hearing us trying to put thought to action, really is what I think it comes down to.
And of course,
if you like this kind of discussion where we talk about news, let us know. We'll do it more.
Yeah, it's not something we do very often, but it's hard sometimes to have an extended opinion on this. But this is actually something that I had an immediate reaction to that was very different from our reaction for what I've said today. Very, very different. It was more, what? Why are we changing that? That's going to cause loads of problems technically. Oh my God, that's why? Really? That was genuinely my first reaction. And then since then, I've educated myself and I've looked things up and I've read a lot and I've found some facts out and I've also formed more opinions. And I've got a very different view on it now than I did a month ago, And
the thing is, it may change again a month from now, depending upon other things.
Absolutely.
We're humans, we're evolving. But we're at the end of our show.
Yes, we are. Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone in Twitch, for joining in. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to us on the podcast, we're back. Trying hard, but we're back.
We haven't done our bring your own manual, so let's do that before we...
Oh, I did sort of mine. I kind of skipped over yours. Sorry.
No,
that was very selfish of me.
What's not
Mine
in the
was
script?
about H.P. Lovecraft.
Was it? Oh,
Yeah,
right. You're just saying that now just to make me feel daft.
No, I
Anyway,
literally said this is my BYOM. You were too busy flipping yourself upside down.
so was it? Sorry, I'm an idiot. I actually have one. Last time it was about PowerShell and about the input variable that is hidden, and it was I spent hours trying to fix a problem that wasn't giving me an error. Today, it's a bit more positive. Keeping on the subject of Git, funnily enough, I've had this on a post-it note on my monitor for about 4 months, waiting for a podcast so I could say it. I've been doing a lot of migration work, which has involved copying and migrating work from an old SVN repo into a Git repo, and I've talked about it for quite a while now. It's a long-term project. One of the things that I've been doing a lot of is diffing diffs. So it's like Inception in diffs. So
I literally was about to go diff, and then I heard you saying diffing diffs.
Diffing diffs. So
wow.
Imagine, I don't know if you've ever looked at a patch file or a diff file for something like Git. It basically, forgotten the name, what they're called now, but there's a specific type of Git. No, it's whatever they are anyway. But basically, if you create a Git patch, and I wasn't aware of this previously, and I know that probably loads of people are aware of this, but it was something that's really, really helped me. If I create a Git patch from one repository, I can actually, as long as the files match, I can actually take that diff patch and apply it to another repository. So in the diff patch, it actually has hashes in it. This is a diff between this hash and this hash. But they're ignored during the diffing process, during the patching process. So I've actually been able to create a full migration process that copies assemblies and does the migration, apply loads of patches, save those patches as files, and then remigrate, because it's a one-shot migration, remigrate, and then script up the application of the patches on top of the original repo. So I've been doing that a lot over the last few months. So when I have to check those patches into Git, and I've actually got another script that diffs the patches from the last version, so I can very quickly go, right, what's difference between because these patches are huge now. What's the difference between what I've just changed in this particular iteration of the migration to the last iteration of the migration, and then it outputs diff files of the diffs of the diffs. Yeah, get a load of that. Anyway, it's brilliant and I love it, and it's really handy.
I think that makes you very geeky.
Well, I'm really trying to explain it to my client as well, who I'm doing the migration for. It's almost a write off. There's half the time they're just like, just do it how you need to do it. It's fine.
Just do it the way I do with my husband. It's magic.
I get so excited as well a lot of the time when I'm trying to explain things to people, because I'm like, this is a great little feature, but it's so deep and geeky and complicated, but I love it.
Oh yeah, believe me, I understand that when I start going into things about like encryption and stuff like that, and people's eyes start glazing over, and I'm just sitting there going, "What is this thing? And then they're just like, "Sure, you do you, Josey. You do you."
I think there is a phenomenon for it, isn't it? When you're explaining something really detailed to somebody, you can use metaphors or analogies. What's the analogies?
Yep, analogies.
Is that the right one? You can use analogies to explain things, or there's that moment, isn't there, where the penny drops, and sometimes either people need to be in the right mood for it while you're explaining the same thing you've explained 500 times before, or you have to phrase it a very specific way that gets through to them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, I'm getting better at that these days, reading people and figuring out how to explain things to people, but I'm still, again, everyone's different. So it's, especially if you're speaking to a group of people, a room of people. Anyway, right, so you can visit our website at www.dnistream.live for links to all our social media channels, Discord, Dev Chat, and our podcast discovery platforms. We pushed another Jolly Guinea Pig update yesterday, I think it was, 2.0.2, I think it was, and all it was a bug fix and a slight security update, so you won't even notice unless you've been on the podcast page and noticed that the arrows for forward and back were Rakuo and Lac Rakuo or whatever it was. They've now been updated and fixed, and that was a lot harder to fix than you'd think it was, because shut up. And
are all of the releases named after guinea pigs?
No, the first one was the left-hoofed antelope. The version 1 was the left-hoofed antelope, and this one's the jolly guinea pig. When we go into version 3, which is coming soon because we're going to do a rebrand, I'll come up with another animal of some description that is happy, sad, or ambidextrous, potentially.
Capybara.
The Jolly Guinea Pig sounds like a pub tavern name. And hello, Tultepe. Have you been there the entire time? Right. Yes, so you can use our website to contact us for any reason, to give us feedback, to become a guest on the show, or just to say, we love you. Or tell us how wrong we are about our opinions about moving master to main.
Yeah. Also, don't forget to follow Twitch.
Yes, don't forget to follow us on Twitch.
She just call us twits.
I nearly said something different, but this is a family-friendly show.
Yes, it is. But anyway, we do hope to see you all next week. We did have a very specific guest that was supposed to join us today, which is why our topic did change. But if all goes well, we will have them with us very soon.
Yeah, a few weeks we've had to reschedule today's guest, but next week, hopefully, we have got a guest booked, and hopefully they will be here.
Yes, and we'll hope to see you next week, 7 p.m. on the UK time, twitch.tv/DNI. All that's left to say is, Chris, I have missed you. I know Miss Seabox watching. I've missed you too.
She won't be listening. She never listens to the podcast. She just puts it on so we've got an extra one viewer. That's all it is. when we pass the 1,000 mark, she'll probably stop.
At least your spouse does that.
I didn't even ask her to as well. How nice is that? I've never asked her to watch it, or unless she's helping me test something, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yes, and it's still all the same. Thank you all of you from Twitch chat who have commented, and be better than we were today. And just remember that we loved you. And we'll see you all next week. And we are still trying to do our Wednesday streams and Mondays if schedules permit.
I got this Wednesday done,
Work
but yeah,
has to
I'm
come
mega
first for both of us.
busy at the moment myself.
So am I. Absolutely.
If I can't do them,
swamped.
sorry, but it is what it is. But we'll just have to do what we can. All right, everybody.
We love you.
Bye.
Bye.